No history of digital audio is complete without mentioning Winamp. Nullsoft's iconic media player was by far the most popular during the so-called MP3 revolution at the turn of the century, and achieved somewhat of a cult status amongst a whole generation of music-loving computer geeks. This was largely due to its ease of use, its customization ability, and its strong plugin architecture, which set trends still seen in today's applications. Winamp takes its name from the AMP MP3 decoding library, which was originally written for Unix. Nullsoft had previously used the library in DOSAMP, which was a simple early MP3 player for DOS. For the purposes of this video, DOSAMP was installed in an MS-DOS VMware session to take screenshots and check functionality. Of note is the fact that many modern MP3 files, which use the technically non-standard MPEG 2.5 format, refuse to play, so they had to be converted back to standard MPEG 2 using the lame encoder. Contrary to popular belief, Winamp wasn't the first Windows-based MP3 player. That honour goes to Fraunhofer's WinPlay 3, released almost 2 years earlier in 1995. The very first version of Winamp, version 0.2, was released in April 1997. At that point, it was little more than a test of the AMP library's ability to compile on Windows. It actually had less features than DOSAMP did, and sported a completely standard Windows user interface. Version 0.92, released in May, was the first version that was recognisable as Winamp with its dark grey colour scheme and glowing green lights, but it still had a standard Windows title and menu bar. Version 1.0 completed the classic look by adding a full Winamp-styled title bar, and by this time it had gained a graphical EQ, a playlist editor, a seek bar, and a simple frequency analyzer. The next major revisions of Winamp were versions 1.4 and 1.5, which added various user interface and usability improvements, as well as an oscilloscope to display the waveform of the currently playing track. In addition, HTTP streaming was added, paving the way for the imminent internet radio explosion. However, with version 1.5, Nullsoft changed the license from freeware to shareware, obliging users to pay for the software after 14 days of use. Winamp 1.6 added a huge number of new features, not least of which was plugin support. Initially only supporting visualization and DSP effect plugins, this was the start of Winamp's legendary customization ability, and hundreds of plugins were developed within a very short time. Version 1.8 came out shortly afterwards, which continued the trend of customization by adding support for skinning the interface. Within weeks, there were hundreds of garish Winamp skins flooding the internet, and Nullsoft relaunched their website with a heavier emphasis on user-created content. The Winamp 1.9 branch introduced input plugins, allowing the program to be extended to support other formats beside MP3, initially just including a decoder for the then popular mod format. By version 1.91, released a week later, it had added support for MIDI and WAV files, as well as CD audio. This made Winamp the most flexible computer-based audio player of its time, and with well over 3 million downloads by that point, also the most popular. After 3 months of development, Winamp 2.0 was released on September 7, 1998. Far too many features were added to count in this version, but the most visible was a more uniform interface with fully skinned EQ and playlist. Later updates to the 2.0 branch included the famous Advanced Visualization Studio by default, which was until then a separate plugin. Unlike many other visualization plugins, it allowed the user to create their own beat-synced animated graphics using a very simple graphical user interface, rather than having to program and compile their own plugins. It gave many people an introduction to the world of graphics programming, including the author of the famous Line Rider game. After a year and a half of alpha and beta releases, Winamp 3 was released on August 7, 2002 to much fanfare. This version was a complete rewrite of the Winamp codebase and added many new features: a media library, a much more advanced skinning engine, and a device called a thinger, which was a window containing several large shortcuts to replace the tiny clutter bar present in earlier versions. Interestingly, Winamp 3.0 is the only version to have ever been ported to Linux. However, support for legacy plugins and skins, amongst other features, had been completely removed from version 3. Users also found the program to be bloated and sluggish, and many reverted to Winamp 2 in protest. Nonetheless, Winamp 3's support for Nullsoft's pioneering NSV video format made it the player of choice for many early internet video channels. Realising it was hemorrhaging users at an alarming rate, Nullsoft scrapped the Winamp 3 codebase and instead concentrated its efforts on backporting the few popular features back into Winamp 2. The 2.9 branch, released in March 2003, contained the Winamp 3 media library and video support, but retained add-on compatibility and did not suffer from the same performance and stability issues. The merging of the Winamp 2 and 3 codebases was complete with the release of Winamp 5 in December 2003. So called because adding 2 and 3 together gives 5, it was much better received than its predecessor. An entirely new interface based around Winamp 3's advanced skinning engine brought its appearance up to date, but support for the by now thousands of existing Winamp 2 skins was retained. Similarly, plugins from Winamp 2 could again be used, and this support for legacy features led to the majority of holdouts embracing Winamp 5 with much enthusiasm. To celebrate a decade of Winamp's existence, Winamp 5.5 was called the 10th Anniversary Edition and released in October 2007. This added much better internationalization support, meaning Winamp could finally become popular in the non-English speaking world. This was also the first major version released without the involvement of Justin Franco, but he is nonetheless credited in the program's About section. To this day, Winamp remains one of the most popular media players and one of the most popular Windows applications generally. In October 2010, Winamp was ported to the Android mobile phone platform, and this received glowing reviews in the press. The concurrently released Winamp 5.6 added synchronization support for this version, and the combination of the two has given Android media capabilities rivaling the iPhone-iTunes combination. However, some of the old criticisms are starting to return. Winamp now contains arguably more bundled adware than ever, it has crippled encoding and CD burning support, only fixable by purchasing the constantly advertised Winamp Pro, and the application itself uses far more memory and disk space than ever before. As a result, many people are considering more lightweight alternatives such as FooBar 2000 and VLC Media Player, and Winamp is slowly but surely losing its devoted fan base. With the spiritual leader of Winamp, Justin Franco, now long gone, it seems unlikely that Nullsoft will again have the bravery and good sense to listen to its users and cut back its well-loved media player to the basics. Whether or not Winamp can gain a new fan base of users through its world-class mobile device integration remains to be seen.